We are the Movies That Make Us podcast, and we thank you so much for being on our panel today. And we have some special guests with us. Why don't you tell everybody who you are?
Hi, I'm Chelsea. I write for Bleeding Cool. I review their comic books and their wrestling pay-per-views. I'm on Chelsea and Noel Go to Hell podcast, and this is Puffin. Did not have a babysitter. Parents, you get it. So, well, there he is. Feel free to say hi to him after the panel. He loves people, so.
He's the best special guest we've ever had.
This is so true. Special guest.
Yes.
This is the best.
Hi, I'm Heather. I work with the Nerdy Bitches podcast or the Asia Radio Podcast Network. And I'm happy to be here. I grew up in Salt Lake City, so it's nice to be back.
All right, and I will introduce ourselves because we have like 5 listeners. I'm just kidding.
That is not true.
But I'm Val from B98.7. I'm on the Val and Mac Show in the morning. I also am a film critic. I do film reviews on Good Things Utah, and I have this podcast with them, Movies That Make Us. I also have a Disney podcast called I collect nerdy things. I wear Star Wars stuff.
She gets cool swag from the studio that every once in a while she gives us.
Sometimes I do that. I was going to bring them to this panel, but if you go by booth 643, I have a whole bunch of the Suicide Squad movie posters that I can't get rid of. I don't know why. But if you want one, you can get one after this.
I'm Tracy, part of the Movies That Make Us podcast. I have a film degree, taught film for about 11 years, and then I do film reviews now. So I get to geek out with these two and have some fun.
I'm Jake, the last member of Movies That Make Us. I don't have the cool credentials you guys have, so I'm just happy to be here. No, I am excited though today because I normally run the kind of moderator role on our show, and today Val's moderating, so I get to play the Val role. So I've been practicing my swears even.
Shut your mouth. I don't swear that often.
No, you don't. She doesn't.
I try to be good. No, we're all going to moderate. We're all going to throw stuff in, but I do tend to take over. So if he's going to be me, he has to take over because that's what I do.
Oh,
yeah,
that backfired.
That won't happen. We know.
So we were really excited when this movie came out. We kind of threw this panel in last minute, and luckily Blake, who's in charge of programming here, give him a round of applause.
Yes, please, Blake Castleman.
The programming here has been amazing. The fact that we have been submitting stuff for 2 years because we were supposed to have, FanX 2 years ago, and we didn't. And so he had to take panel ideas from then and then panel ideas from now because a lot has changed, right? A lot of movies have come out, a lot of shows have come out. And I threw this at him after we had watched the movie, and I said, we've got to talk about Black Widow in this movie. And it was before all of the Johansson stuff went down, so we are going to touch on that today. But this is going to be a deep dive, and it's going to be specifically about her cinematic universe. We might throw some things out with the comic books and kind of put that in there, but it's not going to be like a super, unicorny panel. We're going to talk about the real stuff about Black Widow's story. We're going to talk about child trafficking. We're going to talk about, what made her her. So if that's uncomfortable, I just want to let you know.
So who's ready for a good time?
So for me, I know that a lot of film critics didn't actually like this movie. And talking about this movie even today with some of my fellow film critics, they're like, you're the only one that likes it. But this is what I think, and I don't know about you before we really deep dive into it. One, I do like it as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but when I went to watch it the second time, I took all the MCU out of the movie, and I looked at the movie as a female spy action movie, like a Jason Bourne film. Because I love action films, and we don't have very many that are on that same level, as that. And so for me, I thought it was important to talk about the film because we have strong female characters all throughout this film. It's not just one, there are a lot. Everybody's seen the movie, right? Because if not,
We're talking spoilers.
we're going to spoil everything.
What's the MCU?
What's the MCU?
Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Okay, got it, thanks.
No, that's actually the representative from the studio that lets me go see these movies in advance didn't know what the MCU meant. When I went to see Shang-Chi, I said, I love the way that Shang-Chi is moving the MCU into the new phase, and she's like, what's the MCU?
Is that some sort of technical wire or?
I was just like, dang. Anyway, so for me, to take the MCU out of it for a minute and to look at the film with Scarlett Johansson, who has more than earned her right to have her own movie, right? Like, can I get some cheers for that? We should have had it 9 years ago, 8 years ago maybe, depending on when we wanted to see it in the timeline, but it's way overdue. But looking at her, looking at Pew, looking at, all of the other amazing female actresses in this movie, they put them on par with male actors in other action film movies. They were doing their stunts, they were getting hit, they were hitting, they were jumping out of airplanes, they were doing all the things. But I think during some of the MCU, she set a precedent for it. Because Black Widow has always been kick butt, right? But we didn't see that a lot, and we still don't see a lot of those female movies. So I just want to kind of go down the line, if you guys have anything to say about it as an action film before we get into the Black Widow story part of it.
I actually had to divorce myself from the very first time I saw it and take it kind of out of the MCU, because you're right, this movie should have come out right after Civil War. Yeah. And the fact that it was so much later, it didn't feel like it belonged in a way. And so I had to kind of watch it as just an action film, and to see these women doing complicated choreography and doing it flawlessly, it was just so much fun to watch. And my only real complaint with the film was, I felt like this should have come out 9-10 years ago. But other than that, I thought it was fantastic.
The thing that I really liked about it is Black Widow in the comic books, like her first appearance was very lackluster, and I think that Marvel hadn't really known what to do with her until Scarlett Johansson's influence really came into play. Because even when we first saw her in Iron Man, she was still kind of like the pretty, like, femme fatale secretary. And it's so funny because in the Battle for New York, when that happened, you have Thor catches his hammer, Iron Man zip-zapping around like a crazy man, and then Scarlett Johansson is like, pew, with like her little 9mm. I didn't know what that gun was. I had to ask my dad. He's like, that's what cops use. And I was like, oh, so it's like a common, non-impressive thing. And I think the base of that, not to say anything sacrilegious, but that's pretty much what Black Widow in the comic books kind of was for a really long time. And to see her go, like, hold her own there, like, she's very impressive in that scene. Like, it's like, she doesn't need, like, she could have just done this with her hand, and I still would have been like, oh my God. To see that come to fruition where she has these perfectly set ringlets in the first movie, I've always, like, I'm sure other people with long hair can relate, but how her hair was in the second film, where it's like, ponytails, like, screw it. I think a lot of that was Scarlett Johansson's influence, and it was, I agree, the film was very long overdue, and the fact that we got something a little bit more realistic with just how women function, I mean, my God, we even got a little bit of reproductive organ education in there, and I remember, yeah, and it was just like, I don't know if people know that, you know, but it was layered in so well, and I think that, I don't want to be too corny, but it's like, we owe Scarlett Johansson a huge, like, thank you.
We do.
Because that was a lot of her influence, and I just thought that what she brought and what she insisted on in the movie is really what the character needed.
Yeah, this movie in particular was more of a, like Val said, it was really a spy movie, and it was disregarding the fact that it was a female lead, right? Because we've had just a few samplings of females in a spy movie, but it was a mystery all from the beginning. Of course, with the Marvel in there, it almost felt a little, I mean, don't kill me, a little DC because it was so dark in places. I loved it because I love DC as well.
Yeah, I really like this as an action film. even outside of just, I mean, if I'm watching this, I would put it up there with like the Bourne films and things like that, where even if you take it out of the superhero universe that it exists in, it is much more grounded. And I say that knowing that the final battle happens on this like base that's floating above the earth, and it's like totally unrealistic, but still, I think it's just much more grounded, and I really enjoyed that and appreciated that. I agree that I would have liked to have seen this sooner. Like, I would have liked to have seen it when it takes place in the timeline. That's when it should have come out. And I think Marvel needed to have more guts to make that happen. Yes. They should have done it.
They wait for Wonder Woman.
And they should have had to.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I struggled with it. But I also think if it had come out then, we wouldn't have gotten Florence Pugh in there, and we wouldn't have gotten the actor who plays her dad, because their careers kind of took off after that. And if you take them out of the movie, I don't think I would like it as much. But it still should have happened sooner.
I definitely agree with that, and I kind of want to talk about that today. If you guys have questions or comments or whatever, this is us talking nerd stuff with nerds.
All of
like
you,
we want to do this together. It's not just us talking at you. So please raise your hand, come up to the mic, whatever. But there are some arguments on what, it coming out 9 years ago, how that would have been amazing and influence, but also, so it came out now. If it wouldn't have come out now, there are some definite changes in the story that would have changed. There are some actors would have changed and everything. And so there's definitely an argument on both sides. I also think that if it would have come out when we thought it could, I don't think they would have been able to get as real and as dark.
That's true.
I think that a lot of things have changed in the past 9 years, and Disney has gotten a little more guts because they do have more people helping make the films that have balls, let's just say it. Men and women. They had guts to do it, talking about, the reproductive system, which they kind of touched on, making them sterile in a little bit of the original story, but like really getting into that, is important to how these women act, and how their characters act and how they can turn things on and off, because that's a big deal. It not only messes with you mentally, but it messes up your physical aspect of your hormones in your body. So it's not just like people that don't understand it, they don't understand how much that changes you as a person. But then to go through it at such a young age, and you are not making any of your own mental decisions, somebody else is making them for you, and then trying to come out in the real world and trying to make your decisions. The fact that Black Widow was able to do that just shows you how complex of a character she is and how special she is.
So I just had a really quick comment about how I think that they did a really good job in this movie showing that women really can, the way that they process things and the way that they think about things, it's like you can be going into battle and then still have like off conversations about like whatever, like, cause I feel like they showed it a lot where her and her sister were just talking like normal, whereas I think that when you have males and it's very like a one track, like let me get this done and then I'll get this done.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think it was really great highlighting how that's like how women think versus how men think, and I think that, sometimes they put the female character cast like into a box where they have to do the same thing, where they're like, I'll do this and then I'll do this. Whereas like women, mothers, jobs, whatever, always juggling things all the time. So you don't have the luxury to just like, let me take care of this and then I'll take care of this. So I think they did a really good job.
Yeah, when I'm in an end fight with my sister, very similar.
Well, realistic.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, the Mad Max nature of which my parents allowed me and my siblings to go after each other, there were parts of that fight where I was like, minus the guns and the murder, but it felt like a sibling fight, like the way that they were going at it, like especially in the kitchen. I was the youngest, and I specifically remember like my cutthroat older twin sisters just coming at me, and I was ready, like it felt like that. So yeah, they even nailed like the dynamic aspect. And my partner was saying, of course we're going to talk about her vest. And I'm like, it's a vest with pockets. Find pockets on feminine clothes and you will realize that it is a needle in a haystack. Like, very astute.
Well, I think one of the problems is you typically have men writing these characters and directing these actresses. And when they do a strong female lead, it almost is like they wrote it as a man character and just flipped it.
Right.
And so to have women writing
Salt.
Yeah. And so when you have women writing and you have women directing, and then you have strong female actors like Scarlett Johansson and Florence Pugh who are like, this is the way we're going to do it, that's why we're getting this, and it's so refreshing to see.
Yeah, and that's when it like feels like you have someone that you actually can see yourself in, and that was what was so different for her for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that, and I think that's probably the reason why they feel like fleshed out real characters compared to like what you talked about, Tracy, with a lot of times the women characters are not.
They're disposable. They're thin.
Sex pots. Yeah. Sex pots that can fight.
Put them in the fridge and we'll use
Yes,
them to, shoot the male protagonist's story forward.
Right.
So I'm going to touch on another topic and then we'll go to the next question so we can keep moving along. So just wait just a second. So the sibling, that family kind of relationship they were trying to build from the beginning, right? It really got us sucked in, right? You're watching the movie, you see these two young kids and they're having this Christmas, you see the family, the parents, and then they're in this town that we've all seen before, right? They're in this town, so you're thinking, okay, what's going on? And most of us kind of knew the story going in, but they made it feel like this was just another normal family. They looked that way, and then all of a sudden they're out of there, and you're sitting watching the movie, and I don't know if anyone else did this, but you're thinking to yourself as they're handing these girls over, right? They're just letting these kids go. Like, how often does this happen? Because it does happen all the time. And how programmed did they have to be able to do that? Because I can't even foster a dog. If the dog comes into my house without an owner, it's now mine. So let's kind of touch into that for a minute.
Podcast host too.
That's how Jake and I got on the podcast. We hung out with her and she felt bad, so she kept us.
You guys invited me. What are you talking about?
It was a fun story.
She knew the story.
But let's talk about that. So how did you all feel about, this kind of, we're going to give you this family that usually Disney doesn't give us, right? So you know it's going to be discombobulated, and if you kind of read the backstory, you knew. But they really wanted us to feel, and I felt it, the fact that they were just tearing these girls not only away from who they knew were their parents, but then away from each other. To me, that scene, like, I just got chills again. Like, and I don't know that everybody that watched the movie paid attention to it because they were so, like, just focused on the fact that we hadn't gotten it. Like, get to the action, get to the explosions.
Actually, that was one of the main complaints I heard, was the beginning. And it's like, no, that is so crucial to setting up the rest of the story.
Yeah. So do you guys have a comment on how important that was to the movie, or if you didn't like it, or whatever?
I think it was important, especially in like the crossroads sense, where Natasha is very much of the opinion that, listen, it was that easy to break, it meant nothing, superficially, of course. And then Yelena says, like, no, that meant everything. It was incredibly traumatizing, and I've thought about you guys ever since. And I think we get it a little bit more, the Lexi actually kind of feeling more bad about it. And we can jump into Iron Maiden a little bit later, but I mean, Logan, Utah was a hub for child trafficking a couple of years ago, so it is like a prevalent issue. And the Soviet Union specifically, I mean, there's horror stories out there of them taking kids from moms who didn't have husbands and then using them in like medical experiments. So it's like most of us were probably alive while this was absolutely taking place. I mean, it's happening now, but especially during the Soviet Union, it's 100% believable because it did happen. It's terrifying.
I found it the most powerful part of the show was that she had broken that, and you could kind of see that in the rest of the MCU, and then her story starts to make more sense, and that she didn't become another family member until she became part of the Avengers.
Right.
I think for me, where it became apparent they were really effective with that was later when, and you mentioned this, Chelsea, when Yelena does say, it was real to me. Because Natasha's like, no, it was all fake. No, it was real to me. Mm-hmm. And I was like, yeah, it did feel real. I was legitimately surprised when they showed up and they took the girls away, and then you find out they weren't even their daughters. Because up to that point, I thought they're actual daughters, and it's like, oh, we're going to serve the same. And maybe I'm just slow in following stories, and that could be, but I was shocked because of how they depicted them as a family.
Yeah.
And to touch just a little bit on that, without what I was going to say before, as hard and as vigilant as they were to fight for the girls to get on a plane, and I mean putting their lives in danger and all that stuff in for the girls and stuff. So you really did think that was their parents, because that's what we children.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. So that was really cool. I liked how they did that.
When they turn them into assets, you're like, wait a second, you know, they're not children. They're not your children. They're assets now. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, I'm glad that there was humor throughout the whole movie, because it's kind of like Thor and Ragnarok. You know, you're just like, oh my gosh, I laughed so hard in that. I didn't think Thor could be funny like that. When her sister's saying how she, well, for one thing, when Scarlett Johansson was in Lucy, how she was so, it was because she was the machine and all that stuff, and how she could take her character and be that, and also be what she was in all the other movies she was in, the Island and stuff. And to be almost like a childlike in her thought in the Island. And so she's got this whole broad spectrum. And for them to realize what a gem that they have, and to focus it on her, I am so glad that they did that. And when her sister says, when she comes down, she just
I love that part.
so
Action
that's
girl.
so you, and then her
You're such a
sister does
poser.
it, and then her sister does it. Well, Wonder Woman does it, and she's not the only woman who does it in these comics, And I think it was great that they pointed that out, and that they both had that sense of humor with each other. And the dad was so hilarious, and if you didn't really see it out of their mom, who they thought was their mom, until later on.
Yeah.
Her little answers that she would give the dad, So it was a great movie, and I really liked that. I really like that they're bringing the female aspects of our sense of humor. We have to have a sense of humor in life to get through some of the things we have to do. And men have their own sense of humor, but we have our own, and they really grabbed onto it with this movie. So I just wanted to say that's really cool.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting me talk.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So you'd make fun of your sister. Your sister were like doing these side lunges for their job. You're like, okay, come on.
I just really wanted to make a comment. First of all, that's my sister. So to have a movie with two women that were together when they were little and then apart for so long and then got together again and just kind of, but I love any movie that portrays women as strong, no matter what happened to them when they were younger. They just kind of come out of it and kick butt, and they're just strong women. I love that. I just love any movie that has that in it, as you can tell.
Yeah.
Ray,
Yes.
But that's all. I just wanted to make a comment.
Yeah.
But I really, really loved the movie. It was fantastic.
Well, I think one of the smartest things the director did is the very first scene that they shot was the kitchen fight scene. Because she's like, I want you two to be so up close and so personal with each other in this close quarter fight that's going to take us a week and a half to film. By the time we get to the rest of the movie, you've already bonded, and that's exactly what happened. If you listen to Scarlett or to Florence, they talk about how that was such a key integration for that kind of relationship, yeah?
Well, they love to hate each other and hate to love each other. So
Right.
it was just fantastic. And of course, in the end, of course, they're going to love each other. They're sisters. But yeah, it was great.
And I do love that she is strong despite everything that's happened to her, and I think that's really great. But I also love that they didn't shy away from showing how damaged she was because of everything that had happened to her. Because I think sometimes in these kinds of films, I think Batman's a great example on film. In the comics, they delve into it a lot deeper, but on film, yeah, he's been through these traumatic experiences, and but that's what makes me super tough and cool. But like with her, they're really delving into how hard it was for her to go through all of that. And the reason she's so disconnected is because that's the only way she could move forward. And it wasn't because she is strong, but it wasn't because she was strong that she was able to move forward.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't gloss over the fact that she did blow up a child.
You guys are jumping ahead. We're not to the blowing up children section of this panel.
I forgot. My bad.
Spoiler alert,
Yeah.
you're just organically going with the conversation.
Yeah, sorry.
Everybody organically goes to child blowing up.
Yeah. We went to child trafficking at first, and then I went a hard left.
And then we'll go, and then we'll get back to you. Okay, go ahead.
So, with AMI hitting the grave injustice of knowing how Scarlett's story ends, how do you think that affected the movie and the characters, and did it cheapen it in your opinion at all?
For me, it didn't actually cheapen it. It actually made her sacrifice hit me even harder than it did. So, because when we talk about Endgame and we talk about what Jake just mentioned, and really still showing her emotions, because we see all of her emotions, despite the fact that they try and make us feel like she's concealing them. She's concealing them to everyone outside of us, right? So we, through the whole MCU, we see her hard shell, we see her break down a little bit, we see her fall in love, even though it's not a big mushy thing, because it's not always a big mushy thing, right? We see her care for her best friend who is a male, which I love, the fact that you have a male-female relationship in the MCU that is not romantic. And so, for me, knowing all of this backstory and then seeing her, and this was one of her choices too, is to have her roots all grown out and having, so when you're in turmoil, and this can be male, female, anything, but like I know this for sure, when I'm in turmoil, I change my hair as a woman because it's the only thing I have control over, and if I'm not, it means I'm really in it. You know what I mean? So the fact that she let that grow out, she's trying to eat this sandwich, right? She's there because that's the only family she has left, and she's going to sit in that room until they call.
Yeah.
And so all of those scenes were so much stronger for me now that I know what happened.
I was really concerned, to your question, I was really concerned that it would cheapen it for me, knowing that we already know that she's not going to make it out of Endgame, but the way that they told the story, I felt like it was not the case.
Thank you.
All right, so before we get to you, beautiful hair, by the way.
Thank you.
Both of you, glowing locks.
I'm feeling really uncomfortable right now. Thank you, guys.
You missed
Tracy loves it when we
my
talk about
all panel that I did on Thursday with the tattoos.
No,
I
what
looked
was it?
over,
Yeah.
all shiny, all the way across. We're inclusive. So, my next thing that I want to go, and so we talked, about the feelings, and we're going to get to the baby because that was a big part of this, and I actually was going to move into what the question you just brought up is, when she lets go of Hawkeye at the end, for me now, I feel like she didn't want to take his family away, in my mind, because of what she had gone through. But the Red Room is its own family in the most weird, horrible way. Let's talk about the Red Room for a minute. So do you guys have comments on what you saw in this movie about the women in the Red Room and how they were portrayed? Anyone?
We didn't get to see too much of the Red Room, but I think the effects of the Red Room were shown well. I thought the most horrifying aspect of the Red Room was demonstrated in the pigs.
The way they use those pigs, man.
Oh, yeah.
I was so uncomfortable and was just screaming at my television. I'm like, don't, the pig, someone, the pig, and they're just having this conversation. But I think that maybe that they did it that way to kind of help protect the audience from how horrific that really was. And I think that picking a villain who looked a little bit more Harvey Weinstein-y was on purpose. When you get this creepy guy controlling...
I'm glad I wasn't the only one.
Yeah. When you get this creepy guy controlling women in this way, that's the villain we know. I'm sure that anyone here, maybe even experienced today, probably unfortunate, but the very Harvey Weinstein-y vibe is a very real threat. And it's something that... we experience all the time of just hashtag creep vibes. And so I thought that was done very well, of just the kind of even, I don't want to say foaming at the mouth, but how important it was that even while she's on the run, that she was like, we got to take out the Red Room. Like, she's in the middle of everything. And I thought that that was the best evidence for the Red Room, with that, like, out actually showing like all of the horrors in that movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, because when she does meet back up with her sister, with Yelena, and it was, I kept waiting for you to come back. You went and joined the Avengers, and I kept waiting for the Avengers to show up and shut down the Red Room. Like, you're out saving the world and doing all this stuff. I kept thinking you were going to come, and you didn't. And I think the way they use the Red Room in this, because you're right, Chelsea, we don't get to see a lot of details, but it is this menacing, awful thing that's in the background, and they're so effective at hinting at all of the awful things that are tied to it, including the Harvey Weinstein guy, who just sees women as property.
Right.
I mean, he doesn't even see them as living beings. What is the greatest resource in the world, I think, is what he says at one point. It is, or the most abundant, or whatever. It's these girls that nobody wants. Mm-hmm. That's an awful mentality. Mm-hmm. And
There
I
are
was
people out
shocked.
there that think that.
Yeah.
I know, but I was shocked to see it in a Disney-owned studio film.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Shocked in a good way, though. I was.
To talk to that, like, I was actually really glad that they said that, even though it was a horrible, it's like one of those things you don't ever want to say, because you don't want it to be true, but the fact that they said it in that movie, I'm like, for lack of, fuck yeah, because
It's fine. This is a safe place
women
to
are being
swear.
killed all over the world. We're going deep, right? You know what I mean? So, yes, I did. But, so people before have told me, you should be Black Widow, you should be Black Widow. And I never liked her character until I saw this most recent movie. And now I feel like I've gone from, like, I'll go with my boyfriend, go see the part. And now I'm like, we're going. I like it. I'm invested in it now. So I think there's a little bit of a marketing genius going on there too. But I'm kind of wondering if this movie, if I read into it a little bit more than I should have, but there was a certain amount of sadness to the movie, to me as well, because I was like, yay, we're kind of being seen as equals in this, because as a woman, especially a professional woman, you find you're never really given your due credit. You're never really seen as truly valuable a lot of times. And in this one, a little bit when they're willing to, like, do anything to make these women into these master soldiers and everything like that, you're kind of excited because you're like, yeah, we're equals, but at the same time, there's a little bit, a sense of loss. Mm-hmm. Because if it's in a Disney movie and they're talking about it and they're treating it this way, is this feminism, or is this a step backwards? Like, are we becoming hard and losing the things that make us truly bring balance to the world, like the male-female aspect?
Well, that's why I really liked the differences between the sisters.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Because it shows, and even some of the other women that they showed that were out there, is they all had different levels of their personality and emotions. Some of them were super hardcore, like they turned it off. And some of us, as humans, sometimes we get to that place in our life where at that moment we got to turn it off. And we just got to deal with what's in front of us. And then there's other people that deal with what's going on in their life, and they're super emotional and passionate and do things that way. So I loved how multifaceted they had these women, even though all of these women were created by that man. That's in the back of my mind.
That's good.
But he couldn't take all of their personalities out of them. Yeah, he could control the darkness, he can control the sadness, he can make them kill people and maybe not think about it for a minute, but you saw them breaking through, and some of them were ride and die, they're gonna kill for him, and some of them, the minute they knew that they didn't have to do that, they were out of there.
Well, and not saying anything controversial, but I do agree with you that I wasn't totally sold on Black Widow either, because in the comics, and just make sure that no one's gonna get me from behind, she's not written well. In a story that came out, I think in like 2001, Natasha has Nick Fury cut off Yelena's face, and they face off, Nicolas Cage, John Travolta style. And then Natasha frames Yelena for murder, and then Yelena goes through this entire like gauntlet of horrific things that happened to her, and the whole time Daredevil was just like, for God's sake, somebody be the voice of reason. And the whole time Natasha is very deadpan, and she's like, no, this is what she needs. And it's all because Yelena wants to be the Black Widow, and Natasha wants to show her that how terrible that life is. And this was before, like, thank you, Scarlett Johansson, before being like, oh, you can't have emotion as a character. And I think that's why I would kind of want to like just be kind of like a brown nose towards her again, because she was written so bad. I mean, for God's sake, she cut off her face and then put it on her face and then tortured her for like weeks. And in the end, nothing happens. Yelena's like, well, I'm scarred for life. I'm going to go back to the Red Room. And Black Widow's just like, deuces, you know? So I agree with you. This was a way better depiction of Black Widow, and it's because of Scarlett Johansson's influence.
It was amazing, and it actually got me invested in it, and I felt, I don't know how I read too much into it, but I'm like, if this isn't a Disney movie, it's because times are truly changing, and there are some real things that are happening. It's not just how it's been for a long time, where, yeah, we're working on it. It's like, okay, well, this is really in a Disney movie. There really is some progress being made. Holy crap.
It's slow, but I think it's happening.
Let's just all hashtag holy crap Disney today. Hashtag holy crap Disney. Hashtag Black Widow.
Yeah, because I mean, even the men, it seems like men in general, you even have that in other movies where they realize they don't have to be this villain and they don't have to do these things. And it's like, but you have women going through that same moral crisis when women were always seen as, oh, they'll always do the right thing. Right. Realizing that we have just as much, either way.
Well, and we got to see Alexei be passionate about a father, too. I thought that was like and Iron Maiden was very, like, much more cold. But it did flip a lot of those gender roles on its head.
Right.
I do want to get to everyone's questions, because we could talk about Black Widow for a week in here.
I do just want to say one thing real quick. I do think this movie pushed the envelope a lot for what we've seen from the Disney Marvel Studios. And I think that we're going to see more where Disney's is more open to tackling some of these subjects and topics in a Marvel movie. You're not going to see the Disney castle at the beginning of it, but I think under Marvel Studios banner, they are willing to go there more, which is a good thing.
So those of us who really know Yelena and stuff, so we know that she's canonologically asexual. Is that, and they didn't touch on that a whole lot in the movie. Is that something that you think that they'll put in and move forward with in the Hawkeye series maybe?
I think that they might make people aware of it, but what I would like to see is that they don't. Because in most male movies, they don't make it a big deal about who, and I just want them to be an action movie hero. I do think it's important for everyone to be represented, so I do think just like in Loki, it'll be there and we'll know. But I hope it's not a big part of the story, because I would love to have these female stories without love interests, sometimes, it's good to have that, we all need to be multifaceted in everything that we do, but usually in the time of her life, the age that she is and what she's focused on, she don't have time for that, you know what I mean? She's not on apps right now trying to date anybody, so I think we'll know, but I don't know that they're going to jump into a storyline right away, but I do think that they will touch on it. They've been a lot better at doing that. So I hope we know, but I hope that it's not a huge part of the story. Just any love in general in that. I would just like to see, a kick-ass movie without having to have a love story involved, but that's just me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I was happy that they made Red Guardian not her husband and flipped him into her dad just to remove it. Thank you. No more romance.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So they have her dad as a Red Baron. While he was in prison, stated that he met Captain America several times, but nobody believes him. Is this due to the fact that Captain America changed the timeline?
I think it's more likely that he met the Isaac what's his name?
Isaiah?
Isaiah, thank you.
That's what I was
From Falcon and Winter Soldier that we saw, who was a super soldier. And in the comics, he did take up the mantle of Captain America for a time. So I hope that that's the direction they go with it, because initially they're like, no, that's a bunch of baloney, he didn't meet. See how edgy I'm getting? It's a bunch of baloney.
Oh my God, there's children in the room.
He didn't meet him because he was frozen in ice for 70 years. So I hope that's the direction that they go in, and we get a little bit more stories about Isaiah.
I kind of got the feeling that it was more of him just making up stories and being the bravado of like.
He was peacocking.
I think he really was, yeah. And it was like, well, who's going to refute me? Like, who's going to
Captain
prove
America
that I wasn't doing
was
these
frozen,
things?
I believe. So it's just like,
I said he was frozen, so it was either Isaiah or he's making this up because he wants to be relevant. And I love that so much, is that he's supposed to be this big, huge villain, right? No pun intended on his size. But I love that as well, that, but I think that he, outside of what he used to be when he was their dad, he's now kind of this pathetic man.
Yep.
And he's trying to grasp onto anything that he can to stay relevant, and nobody is buying it. You know what I mean? Like nobody. So I hope that at some point he is in the room with whatever version of Captain America that we have, and they have no idea who he is. You know what I mean? Like, I just want that moment. Yeah.
Well, I thought though that it did highlight the aspect that, well, we're experimenting, creating superheroes, that, also it's happening elsewhere. It was, and so you could see that there was definite growth in both our superhero creation, that, that maybe not an ally is doing it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you.
I am a big costume nerd. I've been costume designers for many shows. I worked at the Shakespeare Festival. And one thing I noticed with this was because the costume designer was a woman, she put in a lot of meaning and a lot of practicality into it. Like when Black Widow, when Natasha's hiding out in, is it Iceland? At the beginning, she brought in a rack of clothes and she was like, okay, you pick out what you think the character would wear. And she grabbed sweats and a hoodie. And to both show her depression and to also show that she's kind of not having to, what's the word say?
Conform?
Yeah, she doesn't have to conform or live up to anyone's standards of what she should look like. And the fact that she's doing the entire battle with Taskmaster at the beginning, in that shows a lot of practicality with it. And also that there's so much, sorry,
You're okay.
You're good.
There's so much dissonance between the Black Widows in the Red Room and the fact that her and Yelena are wearing white, to show that complete disconnect and how they're trying to change things in such a big way. I think the costuming was absolutely genius through most of the show.
Yeah.
That's a great comment.
Yeah,
that is a great comment because, sometimes in really, really good films, you get that deep into the level of the costume design, and I noticed
color in this
color,
is big.
and sometimes it's just what's going to look cool on screen. But to have that extra thought of the functionality of the clothing, because so often these women actors get put in tight leather and they can't move, and
High heels.
high heels.
There was no heels in this movie, and I almost teared.
No, I loved it. It's blow up baby time talk, so.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your comment, and then we'll get to you in just a second. Okay, yeah, because we've got, I'm really watching on time here. So we've been really talking about what we love so much about this movie, and I'm going to move into an area of the movie that I didn't love so much. And it all starts with blowing up the kid, okay? I think her doing it no matter what shows two things, and I'm not saying I don't think that was relevant, hugely relevant, okay? She was thinking of the greater good, but she also was still partially in that mind of my job is my job, right? What did you guys think about when you found out that what she had done? Because that's a huge part of her red on her ledger.
I think it made her death a little bit more valid, because when she was saying that she really wanted to get the red off of her ledger, if you were a mind-controlled spy and you were doing espionage, I think a lot of us can kind of tick that off. Like anything that James Bond was doing, he's not going to feel guilty about it, and he probably shouldn't. He's saving the world. But I think that was like an actual thing where were so desperate to get the job done that you didn't accept what collateral damage would be there. I thought that was like one of those things where I'm like, oh yeah, she kind of had to die, and that's really the only redemption that she's going to get. And it's sad that she did, but that's not really something that you can come back from murdering children.
Right. I thought it showed a lot of her desperation to be part of this bigger group, because that was her break into the Avengers, you know, and you start to understand why she was so desperate to be part of that throughout the film. So that was it. Yeah, I'm done.
I agree. I think the most troubling thing about it for me, and also the most interesting thing about it, is that she was working for S.H.I.E.L.D. at that point. She was with the good guys at that point. As we get to know S.H.I.E.L.D. better through the MCU, we know that they're not the good guys, but you know, she was with the good guys at that point and had to make that call and had to make that decision, which was probably the most awful act that she did, even, you know, in all of her time as a Black Widow. And I think that's super interesting, because she wasn't mind controlled at the time that she made that decision.
Yeah,
she made the decision.
Yeah.
It was her, and she's accountable for it.
Yeah. So now we have that like super poignant part that makes us all, I don't know if when you guys were watching the movie, did you kind of, when that's happening, you know, in my mind, I went back to all the other movies, and then I jumped forward to Endgame, and it just all like came together for me, and I was like, that was another gutsy movie. It was just a gutsy movie, but that was another gutsy move for them to put her in our eyes like that. So I'm like, all right, I got it, I'll buy it. And then the kid isn't actually dead. And this is where I get a little angry, because they threw a character away. Okay?
Yeah.
What I would have liked to happen is, okay, the kid's not dead. You've turned her into this character that we've all been waiting to see, right? And then the character is now good, just in that moment.
Right.
I would have loved to see, and sorry, name the character again, because I have a different
Taskmaster.
I have blood sport in my mind, because I was talking about some Taskmaster. What I would have liked, and tell me if I'm wrong, or if you guys, so they think Taskmaster is good at the end, because all the women are kind of coming together and they're getting Taskmaster out of there. I would have liked them to not have found Taskmaster, because now she's out there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, she may have gotten away from Dad and this controlling, but she's not good.
Well, we didn't find Dad's body.
Yeah.
It's just zip-zapping around, I'm sure.
Yeah, so I would have liked Taskmaster to not have been found. I think that would have been better to me, because I feel like if that was it for that character, they kind of threw it away, if that's it. I don't know if it is, but for me, I was a little iffy. What did you guys think about that scenario, bringing Taskmaster in like that?
I thought it was kind of dumb, and here's why. Because I think that even if Taskmaster lives, she effectively went through like a full-on ego death. Like, her life is ruined by what her dad did to her, and I don't think that freeing her from the bonds of that psychological torture was enough, because she was young enough where her life got kind of taken over. I'm glad that it was freed, so that she's not just running around under Dad's control, but I wasn't buying the redemption.
I would assume she would have had loyalty to him, just because of her whole life and the Stockholm Syndrome and all of that. I thought that she'd still be loyal to him, and I was surprised when she was so, all right, I'm going now.
We have 3 minutes, so I really want to get to your question, and then we'll hurry and tell you guys where you can find us, but let's get to your question and then.
It more has to do with character backstory than directly Black Widow, but I was listening to the discussion and just thinking about how the horrible things that Black Widow went through and how that made into her character. Made me think about how a lot of female characters have tragedy and stuff that makes them grow into a better person. And in contrast, males, you have a lot of male characters that have tragedy and stuff, and that warps and twists them and stuff. And that got me to thinking, is there any way that would work with the female side, or is that just something that us men always get warped over? Like, alternate universe, could there be a villainous Black Widow, is what I'm saying? Like, does that even work for a female storyline?
Yeah. She started out as a villain for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, the Comics Code Authority, the only reason why Black Widow was stayed successful is because the creators could be a little bit more fast and loose with her origin, because heroes weren't allowed to do anything bad, but because Black Widow dabbed in the best of both worlds. And we may see that with Yelena. She may be a villainous widow in the next movies.
Yeah, we don't know. We don't know what direction she's going to take.
Yeah.
I agree. I don't think tragedy affecting someone or how we react to it is a gender-specific thing.
Yeah.
And so I think it's very, I mean, Yelena in a lot of ways is the villainous version of Black Widow until she also breaks free from it. So I think that it's totally possible in an alternate universe. And I think we're going to see Yelena be more villainous than Black Widow because of the end credits scene and her hooking up with Val. And I can tell you that when you connect yourself with a Val, you become a little more villainous.
You do.
We want to talk to you more about this, but they need to get another panel in, so if you want to meet us outside, we're more than happy to discuss with you. Did you guys enjoy the panel today? Again, we could talk about Black Widow for like a week. We want to have more Black Widow panels next year, so if you like this panel and you have an Android phone, because for some reason on the iPhone it won't let you rate in the app, please go to the panel in the app, give us all the stars, give these guys stars so we can come back and do this again. Please follow Movies That Make Us on all the podcasting. Go ahead and let them know where they can find you two ladies one more time before we leave.
Yeah, Chelsea and Noel Go to Hell. Also Utah's Graphic Novel Book Club. If you want to find me on Instagram and talk about Black Widow, I am Sith Lord.
I'm at nerdybitches.com and Nerdy Bitches podcast at anywhere you can find them.